And welcome to Monday. You have Commissioner Rader and myself today. Commissioner Farrell's out. Just turn it over. I guess, I'm assuming Susie's running it.
Susie's going to do the
Yep.
first financial and I'm going to do the second one.
All right.
Is this set up to do the sharing? Oh, okay, there it goes. So the first, is that the beginning of the slideshow? There we go. Okay, so the first fund, we're going to be talking about Veterans Relief. So we have Health and Human Services with us today. So they have a budget of 222,000 for taxes and so far have brought in 132,000. So a portion of the general fund levy is required to be spent on Veterans Relief. So a portion of the general fund levy goes into this fund for those purposes. Intergovernmental revenue has a budget of $51 and has brought in 65. So that looks like it's revenue coming from Department of Natural Resources. It looked like a small amount related to timber. We have miscellaneous revenue of 49,000 and so far have brought in 15,000 and that's made up of investment earnings. They didn't have a budget for other financing sources, which were transfers in from the general fund. That was approved by the last commission to cover administrative expenses. So that was transferred in to cover those costs. We'll be doing a budget amendment in the third quarter to true up the budget for that category.
Did we not change that again and then took it out of interest earnings now?
Yeah, this is Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. For 2025, we did make that change where they're paying for their administrative cost out of investment income.
Yeah, okay. Before I move off this page, this is now sitting with a balance in that account of over $1 million, a little over $1 million. It causes some, I don't know if I want to say issues, let's say it causes some concerns or some drive to do something with it, with that committee. But I think ultimately this group up here is responsible for that.
For the budget.
And if we found something, we do have the ability to do something with it as long as it was veterans, or is it even limited to that?
It's, we'll address that.
Yes, if there was something identified that the board wanted to do with that funding, it has to go towards indigent veterans. But the board could decide to do
Indigent veterans?
low income veterans, yeah.
What's that? What is low income?
So we use the federal poverty guidelines to make that determination.
How long did it take to acquire that $1 million?
So it happened slowly over time. So it kind of grew a lot during COVID when a combination of things. One is that service centers weren't as open, a lot of things were shut down. And so the access had changed during that time. There was also a lot of other assistance out in the community during that time as well. And so the utilization of the fund wasn't happening. But then also there was an increase in the revenue during that time. So just a combination of all of those factors, it really grew that end balance. They did adjust, the advisory board recommended adjusting some of the assistance limits this past year, and we have seen that affect the expenditures. So
Yeah.
we anticipate having more expenditures because of that for this year.
And I think that's a good thing. In fact, at last meeting, I told him you should probably look at that every year because you don't know what's rising and
Mhm.
the goal is to fill the cracks and make sure these people are taken care of.
Yeah, I think by the end of this year, our expenditures will probably be close to our annual revenue. We'll still have a built up, fund balance, but I think our expenditures will be a lot closer to our revenue. So,
So to the chairman's question about the authority ultimately falling on us as far as the expenditures of that money,
mhm.
does the board have to follow that same guideline as far as the low income veterans, or can the Veterans Board can use it for whatever they want as long as it's veterans?
No, it's for low-income veterans.
They have,
Yeah,
they abide by the same.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so all the assistance that's issued, in order to qualify for the assistance, you have to be
Yeah.
low income. Mhm.
And when it was set up, if you read through it, it never used to have this kind of money. In fact, there was a lot of years where they didn't know if they're going to have money to
Mhm.
cover. So it was set up to try and fill gaps that all the other programs don't do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it's at. And that's kind of the angst over there is they want to grow beyond that because they keep seeing this here. And
Mhm.
I get the thought process. I just want to be careful about where it goes. I've said it a million times. I'm not interested in paying salaries and stuff like that. I'm interested in tangible stuff.
Mhm.
But it had to be in like job programs or housing or things like that that would help a veteran that's struggling. You could do something with it.
Yes, a lot of what's issued is for food assistance, or occasionally like emergency car repairs, some help with utilities, things like that is what we typically see. Yeah, but we have talked before about looking, because we do have some built up there, we've talked before about looking at some different ideas, like with bigger organizations or,
Yeah.
geared towards a veteran housing unit or something like that. So there's certainly some other options we could look at. We haven't really gone down that path before, but yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Next slide, please. So personnel, we have a budget of 32,000 and so far they've spent just over 14,000. So the bottom shows that they don't have any FTE allocated to this fund. And that's because the health department, they basically do job costing. So any employee that spends time related to this function would then allocate that time spent to this fund. So that's why there's technically no one budgeted for this fund, but we have personnel costs. Services has a budget of 247,000 and so far has spent about 86,000, which is below target so far for the year. Those expenses are going to be based on reimbursements. They're not quite sure when those will come in. So it's kind of hard to track that against a flat line target. So our next fund is going to be human services. We have taxes budgeted at 494,000. And so far I've brought in 295,000. So that is mainly made up of property taxes. So those collections will be pretty flat until we get closer to October. Intergovernmental revenue has a budget of 1.4 million and so far has brought in 50,000. So the large piece that plays into this of why we haven't brought in a ton is a fund that we're going to talk about later, Fund 14101, will be closing January 1st, 2026. So all that activity, now that the state's fiscal year is ended, will start rolling over into this fund. So all the revenue that was being recorded in 14101 will now start showing up into this fund as the department starts that transition. Goods and,
And why are we making that change? It's just cleaning stuff up, okay.
so goods and services has a budget of 13,000, and so far we've brought in just over 5,000, so we are right on track with that one. Miscellaneous revenue has a budget of 65,000, and so far has brought in just over 20,000, and that's going to be your investment earnings. Personnel has a budget of 342,000, and so far has spent 150,000. They do have 7 FTE and no vacancies. Supplies, we have a budget of 11,000 and have spent just over 7,000. So that is right on target for the year. Services has a budget of 1.1 million and so far has spent 147,000. So we should see that trend right along with the revenue when that other fund starts transitioning. We do have a budget for transfers of 91,000. We do expect that to be done in the fourth quarter for that transition. So this is the fund that's going to be closing January of next year. So we have intergovernmental revenue of 2.8 million and so far have spent or received just over $1 million. So that's made up of grant revenue coming from the state. And then other financing sources is a transfer in from Fund 14001. So personnel, we have a budget of 152,000 and have spent 88,000 so far this year. We should see, as the fund's starting to close, probably a little more activity for personnel, just staff spending more time working with this fund, and then should level off as the year wraps up. Supplies currently didn't have a budget and has spent 3,000 so far this year. That's something we'll look at truing up in the third quarter budget amendment. And then services has a budget of 2 million and so far has spent 810,000. And then we also have transfers of 32,000 and so far have spent 17.
In this department, in this budget, what constitutes a service and who do we bill for that?
So the services category, when you're looking at it here, is our contracts with community partners. And so this fund includes a couple of different state grants. And so what's budgeted in services is our pass-through contracts with providers.
And it's all reimbursement, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we have the Health Department, Fund 14301. We have licenses and permits. We have a budget of just over $1 million and so far have brought in 670,000. So we are slightly over target for the year. Intergovernmental revenue has a budget of 1.4 million and we currently have a negative amount. We did have to return funds to the grantor that we didn't spend. Goods and services has a budget of 623,000, and so far we have spent 313,000, or have brought in 313,000, so we are right on target with that revenue stream. Miscellaneous revenue has a budget of 161,000. So far, we've brought in 10,000, and that's going to be investment earnings. Personnel has a budget of 2.9 million and so far has spent 1.2 million. They do have 21 filled positions and 3 open vacancies. Supplies, we have a budget of 105,000 and so far have spent 136,000. So we are slightly over target for that expenditure category. Services has a budget of 1.6 million and so far has spent 551,000. So we are slightly below where we would expect to be for the year. And then debt service doesn't currently have a budget and so far shows a negative amount related in the amount of 52,000. So that's going to be related to an accounting transaction for the department's subscription-based technology arrangements. So they are required to report those leases and amortize them over the life of the lease.
Do we know why we're 30,000 over in supplies halfway through the year? Okay.
Low-income housing, so Fund 18401 has a budget for taxes of 171,000 and so far have not received any. So based on our follow-up with the department, this is affordable housing sales and use tax, and they typically start seeing those collections start in July. Intergovernmental revenue has a budget of 4.4 million and so far has spent or received 1.3 million. That's largely related to grant revenue. Goods and services has a budget of 587,000. So far they've received 333,000, so they are really close to target. And this is document recording fees. So a portion of the fee gets placed into this fund. Miscellaneous revenue has a budget of 182,000 and so far they've brought in 32,000. And again, that's just going to be investment earnings. Other financing sources has a budget of 75,000 and so far they've brought in 60,000. So that's a transfer from the Affordable Housing Fund. Personnel has a budget of 144,000 and so far has spent 106,000. So it is slightly over where we would expect them to be at this point in time for the year. Supplies has a budget of $2,700 and has spent 528. So they are slightly under for this fund. And then services has a budget of 3.5 million. So far they've spent 1.2 million. And these are costs paid to subcontractors within the community. Those aren't going to occur at a regular interval. So the opioid fund, miscellaneous revenue has a budget of 277,000. So far they've brought in 152,000. So that's investment earnings as well as the settlements that the county receives. We expect to receive another 370,000 this year in settlement payments.
I know we've seen another couple agreements come in, but they haven't opened up the portal or whatever it
No.
was to.
Yeah.
They were just notifications.
They're just notifications that another participation agreement is coming. And so that's on the Purdue.
So, and we really don't know. I think they kind of give a gross dollar amount, but we don't know what that means down as it breaks down to the states and counties, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
They did on the, just speaking about projected, they did provide projected numbers on their website now. And so, except for the Purdue, and then there's also a Kroger, I think, that we just started getting, and they inform me they're gonna update it as soon as possible, but it's really a good thing. It has the projections and those that go all the way out
For these,
for these.
both of
these
these are
different.
yearly. They're not lump sum. These ones are yearly.
I don't know about the Purdue, but
Yeah.
almost everything except for the Janssen or the J&J
Yeah, there
is
was one
going
that
to
was
be
just lump, but
split.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it looks like on an annual basis for the next couple of years, we'll get about almost 400,000. And then in about, I think 7 years or something like that then it drops down to 300,000, then it drops down to 200,000 at the very end. But so it's going to be providing a pretty steady stream, even without the Purdue, to about 400,000 for the next couple of years.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So personnel has a budget of just under 5,000, and so far they've spent just over 2,000. And that's just staff time allocated based on duties performed. Services has a budget of $500 and so far hasn't spent any this year. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll go ahead and jump into the financial management. This is the monthly report that we prepare for you for the largest funds in the county and just a general overview. So
Do we have anything else with HHS? No. Before they get out of here, can I'm sorry.
Sure. Thought you were letting them off.
Yeah. I know the consolidated contract's coming up and it's about 11 million this year. Last year it was around 8. I'm using round numbers. Year before that or 2 years before that or whatever, when I first came in, I think it was around 4 or something.
I think, yeah.
So in the time I've been here, it's grown from 4+ to 11 million. And why, what is the growth for? I mean, what do they want to use it for? Is it homeless housing? Is that the
Yes.
thing?
Yes.
This is, I'm not picking on anybody here, but, and I haven't seen current stats, but the last stats I've seen is Washington State is one of the fastest growing spenders in homeless housing. We're also the fastest growing in homeless. The more we spend, the more they come. It's, if that isn't the definition of enabling, I don't know what is. I know what I can tell you is Lewis County is not wanting to take this money. They're wanting to send it back. And so I called one of their commissioners, or I talked with one of their commissioners, had a conversation, because my understanding has always been if we don't take that contract, they will just farm it out to someplace else. So the money's going to be here whether we have a look at it or not. And they're telling me that's not necessarily true.
Hmm.
So I would appreciate a little bit of research on that, because I'm about done in enabling this nonsense. The more we spend on it, the bigger problem we have. And I don't think, it's not doing the people any good. It's not doing our county any good. So if you don't mind a little bit of research on that, because I know at least one county is looking at that and not believing that they have to take that whole thing, because they have some of the same concerns. We can't, I mean, if you had more flexibility, we could help some seniors struggling, or we could help some other people struggling, but it sits there to help homeless, and we just keep growing that population. It just seems ludicrous to me.
Yeah, originally, when we first got involved with this grant, it was really specific to the HIN program and some housing for individuals eligible for the HIN program with the state. It was pretty focused on that. And then over the years, we've seen some state legislation where some additional funding is getting approved and it's getting put into this contract. And not specific to the HIN program anymore. It's kind of gone outside of that, and now we have additional funds that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And I've always been told from the state that if counties choose not to engage, that they would do a request for proposals in your county and look for a nonprofit in your county to administer the funding. That's what I've always been told. I'm happy I'll reach out again and get some more information on
Yeah,
that.
just kind of clarify that, because
Yeah.
I know for a fact, at least one county is looking at that and believes that that's not the case. If they really want to, and this has nothing to do with HHS, but if they really want to help these people, then quit taking it out of people's wallets. They think the government can grow this stuff, and they're right. It's growing homelessness in Washington State at unprecedented rates. It's sickening. If you want to help people, put it back in their dang pockets and let them spend it.
Mhm.
So I would like to look at that, and I'm not telling you 100% sure that we can have that option, but if we do, I think I'm done enabling this stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I'll reach out and get some more clarification. We did just get our state contract a couple weeks ago. We had started working on the 2 pass-through contracts we talked about before with CAP and the Mediation Center. So our plan was to bring those to the board here in the next few weeks.
All right.
But I'll reach out and get some clarification on
Okay.
that piece.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank
Is
you.
that an all or nothing contract?
Well, that's been our understanding.
Yeah.
And so my question, when I was talking to the commissioner up there, I said, my understanding is if we don't spend it, they're going to give it to somebody. It's going to get spent. And his says, well, we've reached out to our attorney, we reached out to Wasack, and I don't think that's true. And they were going to give me some follow-up on that, because they're struggling. The more you spend, the more it grows. And I don't think that does anybody good.
Well, no, I agree with you. It's a downward spiral, because what happens is if you look at the number of NGOs that are all fighting for this money,
Right.
it's not only is the homelessness growing, but so is the NGO market. And as there's more money available, we're creating more nonprofits
So
looking for that money.
So then it begs the question, is the money actually going where it's supposed to be?
Exactly.
In theory, if you're spending money on something, the budget should be less because it's improving the situation
Mhm.
and it's getting better, and it's going the opposite way. And to me, that's just enabling a broken system. And there's bigger things that need to be done other than just throw money at it. So I appreciate your help on that if you
Yeah.
can.
Yep. I
Okay.
will reach out. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, ready for finance. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, next slide. So this is just a snapshot. June or July. So this is, yeah, these are through June. Here we are at the end of July, but this is through June. So general fund revenue brought in is about 29 million, a little bit over. And then expenses so far is 35 million. So we're sitting at a deficit of a little over 5 million right now. This is partly because we don't receive all of our property tax at one time. We receive trickle flow, and the second half is payable in October. So we'll see in the range of about $9 million more coming into this through the end of the
Okay.
year.
So you don't, just doubling that, you don't believe at the end of the year, we're going to be 11 or 12 million
No,
under? Okay,
no.
good.
On our county road, revenues that's come in is about almost 12 million, and expenditures a little over 8 million. On this fund, a lot of the expenditures are summer and later. And so it's showing a surplus right now of 3.7, but that's going to change as the summer projects and the various road projects start coming in. And then solid waste is another one we wanted to highlight because it's one of the larger funds. Its revenue is sitting at about 11 million, while its expenses are showing a little over 21 million. But there's one large entry that was booked in there that was related to the post-closure that was over $11 million. So without that, they're pretty much on a sitting. They're not going to be, they won't be in this large of a deficit at the end of the year. That's looking at 10 million right now.
So we had one, what was the one big thing, Sean, that,
The post closures.
yeah. While he's getting up here, I'll go back to county roads real
Okay.
quick. We, all three commissioners got an email from a gal who lives out on Climber River Road. And we're pretty quick. If something goes wrong, we'll say something. Well, I think there's two sides of that street. The shop manager out at Kalama dealt with her and she just couldn't be happier than, she just ecstatic over the service that he gave and the fixing of what looks like a small problem to us, but it was a big thing to her. And so I did call the shop on Thursday, but I know they're all out working. But if you want to make sure you pass along appreciation from the commissioners that we do recognize, I believe they do a great job. We just always hear the crap usually, but when we hear the good, I think it's upon us to talk about it just like we do the other. So
Yeah.
our appreciation to
It's always good
his
to hear
efforts.
the positive side, so thank you
Yeah.
for that. We'll pass that along to the
Yeah.
crews. Thank you. On the solid waste, in first quarter, we made an entry for about $11.5 million. That funds the post-closure, the closure funds, as well as our equipment reserve funds. So we calculate everything at the end of the year.
Oh, so
And
you
then we
just
make
make it
one large entry
one
then.
large entry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this solid waste is just the one account, that's the enterprise account
All
that
right.
brings in the billings and revenues.
I didn't know if a problem showed up that we had to throw money at or,
Not yet.
yeah.
Okay, next slide. And then this is revenues at a glance. And so this is just to look at some of the larger revenue streams that we have coming in to the county. In the general fund, of course, our personal property, our real and personal property tax is one of our largest revenue streams. And as I said, this one is based upon two large billings. One was April and one will be October, but we're sitting right at on target compared to last year. We brought in a little over 11.4 million, and last year at this time we had almost 11.2 million. So
Yeah.
no issues there. On our sales and use tax, we budgeted 11.5. We brought in 3.3. Last year at this same time, we were at 3.4. So we have a more detailed slide later to talk about sales tax.
You know, this is. what
Still
we're-
down a little bit.
Yeah, this is what we were talking about when we got in the budget. It's really that the funds that come in to operate the county are not growing as fast as the
Right.
funds required to pay for the county. And that's really the issue we're kind of running into and
Yeah. And this one we're seeing,
I won't go into it again, but I believe it's the state and their doings up in Olympia that caused a lot of this, but
yeah, this is one we're seeing about a 5% decline.
yeah.
Right now. And I think it's also, you know, hesitancy on spending and things like that and the economy in general. On timber excise tax, we budgeted 1.1 million. We're sitting at very close to what we were at last year. And that's about 51% of budget. Then we go down to some other accounts in the general fund, not as significant as our taxes, but our intergovernmental. Our PUD privilege tax came in and we budgeted 2 million. We brought in $2,031,850. So just a little bit more than we had budgeted, but slightly lower than what we received last year. Then these other ones are not as significant. We have the marijuana excise tax, the liquor, beer excise tax. Those are pretty much, they're fairly consistent with last year. And so they're just consistent. So combined those two, we brought in a little over about 100,000. Criminal justice, which is an intergovernmental. This is through, I believe, our sheriff's office. And this is, we budgeted $1.3 million. We brought in 660,000. And last year we were at 670,000. So we're pretty consistent with where we were last year. Next set is our goods and services for the general fund. Our largest budget in this area is our jail booking fees. And so we budgeted $1.5 million, 33,000. We've already brought in 48%, 740,000. And we're actually way up compared to last year. Last year at this time, we had brought in basically $572,000.
Are these numbers all based on previous rate?
Yes, these don't reflect the new rates that will be going into effect once they sign their contracts with the cities. And then we also have the one that was signed with the state that was 5% increase. The next line is our motor vehicle license fees, and we budgeted 875,000. We're at 465,000. So we're slightly up over last year, but we're at the same percentage of budget, for 53%. And our additional goods and services, we're fairly consistent with, we're a little bit up over last year, but last year was 110,000 at this point in time. And this year's basically 145,000. And then finally, in the general fund, we have our investment income, rents. And so for investment income, we had budgeted $2.150,000, sorry, tongue-tied. And we brought in 930,000 so far. It's slightly lower than last year, but we're still on track percentage-wise for our budget. And other interest, that's a small category, and we're down a little bit compared to last year. And then rents is our rent from our land, primarily from our landfill. And we're sitting at 50% because we're at the middle of the year, June. So, and we have a little bit of miscellaneous there, but that has an entry that was booked to record some fair market value adjustment, and that was a negative 403,000. This is an accounting entry that's made. Going on to county roads, some of one of their largest areas of income is their taxes, real and personal property tax. And they budgeted 14 million and they brought in 8 million, 56%, very consistent with the general fund as far as percentage of revenue. And it's up a little bit over last year. Last year at this time, they had brought in 7.6 million. And as I said, we will expect to see another bump in that revenue and not until October. And then motor vehicle fuel tax, good news to report here. I think they finally fixed their system. And so they caught up on our disbursements to the county. And for example, we received 300,000 in June on this one. We budgeted a little over 2 million and we've brought in 587,000. A little bit, slightly less than last year, but tracking pretty closely. And then solid waste is another area that we monitor, and they brought in, I think we've already talked about this, but they brought in 10.8 million. And at this point last year, they brought in 9.6. So we're slightly up. We have some additional transaction at the transfer station when compared to last year.
Sean, the change we did to tipping fees, is that go into there or is that different?
That'll be partially there. We're also seeing a little bit of an uptick at the landfill itself from some of our outside customers. Just wanted to address, you see 10.8 million here of 27. That doesn't math out very well for halfway through the year, right? But this is only 4 months because we accrued that 2 months back to the prior year. So we'll never see that 100% in these meetings because we'll only be 10 months of the year in December.
Yeah.
So will we see that contract, the new contract that was signed on the second half of the year numbers?
Are we talking for landfill?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of our customers that we've recently done with are not tracking as high as they previously were, but we do have some minimums in place that should help offset that.
Okay.
Now we'll dive into the expenses by the major funds. So in general fund, we have personnel that's budgeted about 46 million. This is benefits and salaries both. So it's 46 million. Actual to date was a little over 20 million. So we're tracking at about 45% of our budget. Last year at this point in time, we were 44% of the budget, so tracking very closely to what we had last year. And then for supplies, we have budgeted 2.5 million. We've expended 783,000. That's about 30% of our budget, 30% of that budget line, but we're actually a little bit lower than we were last year at this time. So that's good news. And then services, we've budgeted 21.4 million. We have expended almost 11.5. That's 54% of our budget. And last year at this time, we had expended a little over 10 million and 53% of the budget. Overall, this services line, it has a lot of our internal service department billings that are charged to our general fund. And we've seen an increase over prior year internal billings as a result of increase in expenses and things like that. So that's what we attribute the difference from last year to this year's, the increase in our service fee billings. Capital, we don't have a lot budgeted here, 456,000. We've spent 125,000. We're down a little bit from last year. So not anything significant there, but we're on track. Debt service, we've budgeted 2.6 million. We've only expended basically 419,000. This time last year, we had spent 522,000. On this, we'll see a larger increase. One of our large debt payments is December 1st for the landfill. So that this doesn't have a typical, it's not 12 months type of activity. It pops when we have some of our bond issuance due, and that's typically spring and then one for December 1st on the landfill. That's our largest debt. On transfers, we budgeted 3.1 million. That's primarily transfers from the mental health tax to the general fund departments that are receiving that. We've booked already 1.5 million, about 50% of our budget. And last year at this time, we have less expenses than we did last year. Last year we had $1.7 million. So in total, we've been on our expenditure budget, we've booked 46%, and last year at this time we had booked 45%. So we're tracking very well with last year. County road personnel expense, a little over 9 million is budgeted for this. We've expended 3.8 million. That's 41%. Very consistent with last year. The last year's budget was 3.6 expenditures. Supplies, 3.5 million. We've expended 1.2 so far. A little bit higher than we were last year at this point in time. But Sean's here. My notes don't on supplies.
Sure.
Yeah.
So as you guys may have known, we started chip sealing
Oh,
earlier
chip
this year in June. We started right at the beginning. I think last year we started at the beginning of July. So we're ahead of the curve on there. That's gonna be the majority of our supplies. About 1.8 million of that, or half, is our chip seal program. You know, when we see those tanker trucks of oil coming in, that's a $13,000 bill every time. And we're going through 5 to 8 of those a day.
Yeah, and the other thing in this budget, when we originally put this budget together, when Rhodes put it together, they had anticipating possibly buying a spray truck. That was, and the supplies for that, and those were included in the budget, and we're probably going to come back and amend that, reduce that, as well as the capital line, because they went out for bid and the striping bid came in lower than anticipated. So they elected at this time to go back.
We're looking at doing it ourselves, and they decided we better get more competitive.
Yeah, so the supplies on that's about $500,000. We'll be seeing that come out our next budget amendment there. Hopefully it holds true next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for services, their services budget's a little over 9.3 million. They've expended 2.5 million, 27% of the budget. And last year, this time, they had spent 2.3. And capital, we've got a large capital expenditure there for 27.7 million. We've only expended 533,000. So I'm not sure.
So I'll jump on
Yeah,
in.
jump on that. Forgot what.
Last week, we had a meeting with Susan in here talking about 26 realistic projects. And so we'll be coming back on that budget amendment as well. Those projects we identified rolling into 26, reduce those out. Then going back to the services line, there's a few big items that are still coming out of that. You know, our overlay project is the big one, just shy of $3 million there. And then the next one's going to be our striping program. So really keeping and maintaining those roads out for the citizens.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, the capital, when we put the budget together, we budgeted all of the ARPA funds as if they were going to be expended this year. And we know that's not realistic, but we wanted to have it just in case. And so we will be reducing that budget and rolling those projects to 26.
Do they still have and you maybe not have this answer, that might be a Kaylee. question. They still have the drop dead date on ARPA funds for having projects completed? Do
Yes.
they still have that? They haven't changed that?
Mm,
Is that like into 26?
Yep, it's December 31st.
Okay.
So the majority of the 17 million that it was increased in 2025 was due to a lot of this roll-up that we're talking about.
Yeah, the capital line is gonna be 100% driven by our road projects, except for this year we had the spray truck in there as well. So we'll be reducing that out. But the rest of the funding is all road projects, bridges, infrastructure of that sort. Yep.
Okay, moving on to solid waste. Solid waste personnel was budgeted 2.7. They've expended 1.2. Pretty consistent with last year. At this time, they had expended 1.1 million. Supplies budgeted very consistent with last year. They budgeted 1.6 million. They've expended 867,000. That's about 54% of their budget. It's a little higher than last year, but some increase in supplies. Purchase of rock for the landfill roads was a special expenditure there. And then services, we budgeted 17 million. They've expended 8.1 million, about 48% of their budget. And this is related to some increases in internal service billings and also an increase of 100,000 for waste control payments for the first 6 months of the year.
I just want to highlight, you don't usually see the budget go down by $5.5 million. So that was related to the PUD project and that not moving forward, so.
Yeah, we had committed that money for that and it didn't.
I think it was over 6 million.
Yeah, it was a $6
Yeah.
million commitment.
Yeah.
And then on transfers, we had budget 11.5. We did that transfer earlier in the year for 11.5, and compared to last year, at this time, it was 7.7. This is a glance at our property taxes. Like I said, we budgeted, we have billing for 20 million, and so far they've received year-to-date 11.2 of that. The majority of what's remaining will come in September and October. And then one thing to highlight is in that supplemental, the supplemental column, you'll see that for tax year 2021, I think it's 2021, that we have a large increase there, and this was due to a property tax settlement. So this is now on the books to be collected, which is in total $389,000 to be collected. Otherwise, this is tracking very well and consistent with what we've seen in the past on property taxes. And then we go to sales tax next, and this is where I was telling you the details. January, we saw a 6% increase over the prior year, but then it fell off and it's been about a 5% decrease every month since then. We're sitting at the month of April collections, which came through in June. But in total for this year, compared to last year, we're about $95,000 less. So nothing drastic. And we still anticipate making budget of 11.5. Because typically we see an increase in the summer months in our sales tax, and then again in December. So I'm hoping that we'll rebound on that.
We talked about this, it's just a slow spiral down. The more they tax, the less we get. How does that make sense, right?
Yeah,
they don't get the fact that they've taken it out of productive pockets and put it into unproductive pockets. And I don't know why they don't get it. I think they just don't want to get it, but
Yep.
it's insane.
The recording fees, the good news on this one is our recording fee transactions through June, almost every month have seen an increase over last year. This is just the number of transactions so that you can get a feel for the number of transactions. We haven't rebounded to 23's numbers. Well, in some areas we have. April and May, and we're higher than 2023's numbers. But anyway, this is very good news, our recording fees. And then the next
Do
slide.
you know what kind of balance we have in that? Because we're starting to get asked here and there.
No, but I can find out for you.
Just curious. I've had a couple questions on it, and I'm sure the other commissioners have too.
How does that work? Like, for example, that Longview turned their recording fees over to us. Do they come and transact the business here in our building?
Let's see how to explain it. All the recordings fees come here. The cities can take their portion if it's significant. They want to take it and they control it. And Longview did that, but then they have to set up their own housing authority to manage it. And they did that for a while, which is fine. If they want their fees, they can have their fees. If it all stays with the county, then I'm pretty confident in saying to access the global fees, then they bring some kind of
Yeah, we have once a year.
proposal.
Yeah, once a year we have a disbursement to the cities, and it's based upon a contract. And so that disbursement happens in February, where we turn around and we collect it, and then it draws interest, and we turn around and pay those to the cities, their share of those recording fees.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's
And they-
done
they
in
can-
February.
They can always ask for more, whatever the global is. That's why I was kind of wondering where we're at on that now,
Yeah.
because we're starting to get questions.
I
But
can
that would
find
take
out.
a proposal by him to do that. And usually, I haven't seen it run anywhere else than through HHS.
Right. Oh, they're already gone. Yeah, so that, when we did their financials, you'll see that there was a transfer. It was about 50-something thousand, which was the county's portion of that February disbursement. So
Okay.
it's not a lot of money coming through, funneling through on this. This is, when you see these numbers, these are the numbers that we collect for, and it's broken out into different areas where this money is, but the majority of the money goes to the state on the recording fees.
Yeah.
But the good news is we're up almost every month this year so far on our recording fees compared to last year. And even in some cases, we're up over 2023's numbers, which is really good.
Oh, here it's showing what's coming in. Okay.
And that's the end of my finance. I do have an item for miscellaneous under the
Okay.
business meeting. I handed out to you, we received two rural county public facilities applications. The first one is Scott Hill Park and Sports Complex, and the applicants, the Rotary Foundation of Woodland. They submitted this, and they are asking for $550,000 to complete phase 1 of their project. And then they've also added in their request $790,000 to start phase 2. And I'm probably gonna ask them to come back and submit a separate application for phase 2, because if we fund this $550,000, my cash flow, I'll tell you in a minute, is getting very low on the Rural Public Facilities Fund. So, but anyway, this is to finish phase one, and they anticipate phase one with this funding. They'll be able to be operational in April of 2026. So that's good news. And be able to actually open. So they provided a lot of information about this multi-sports, multi-use sports field complex.
Well, I would agree with you on the phase two. When they came in and presented, I usually don't like doing anything without all three here, but I know Commissioner Farrell I think we all wanted to see that park open, but I don't think we had a real taste for phase two at this point in time, unless I read it.
My understanding was they were looking at getting grants and other money once phase one was done.
Right.
To help them with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're showing that next year they'll be applying for a state YAF grant
yeah.
of 1.5 million.
I think we had a fairly strong interest in getting that park up and running, and that's why we had an interest in phase one, but phase two, I think, is a different animal, and I would set that aside.
And then we have a second submission application, which is for Riverside Park Legacy Play Area. And this request is through the county's Parks and Recreation Department, and they're asking for 523,000. The total project is a little over $1 million, and they've been awarded a RCO WWRP grant. I don't know what that is, but
Yeah,
of 500,000. So they're asking for 523,000 on their application.
I thought we had stored all money, dredge spoil sales, that was gonna bring that down. Are we looking at something different?
You can't get it if you don't ask.
Yeah.
No, we do have money coming in from Cook Ferry. We are expecting to see that increase. And we'll probably have some discussions with the board on its future in the next few weeks on a Wednesday meeting. But that funds can be used for anything park related on any park within the county. Right now, we're just trying to lock up a funding source so that we can accept the grant and start the process moving forward.
Okay,
So these funds wouldn't specifically be just for Riverside, is that what you're saying?
So the grant itself requires it to have the funding obligated to accept it, the other half, because it is a 50% match. And so we're trying to obligate those funds, and then we may be able to move out of that if the Cook Ferry funding comes in stronger than we expect.
so the goal is to whatever we authorize here to still use the Cook Ferry
Mhm.
dredge spoils money first before you tap into this, because the way it kept being explaining that we were expecting to hope to see around 300,000 out of the Cook Ferry funds, and that this would be a less request.
Yes.
Okay,
So we asked for it all. I think that was based on some recommendations there. But we do have other funds available for these.
Yeah, so my recommendation on this project, because my cash flow, after we pay all of our commitments for this year, my last commitment is to Port of Longview. And it will bring my cash down to about $1 million, $1.1 million. And then if we fund both of these this year, then it will bring my cash down at the end of the year. Anyway, bring my cash flow down to about $1 million, less than $1 million. And I calculated 143,000. So I would like to do the park on a cost reimbursement basis, have their contract cost
talk-
reimbursement.
on which part? Scott Hill?
Riverside,
Riverside, on a cost
Riverside.
reimbursement basis?
yeah. And then that will allow parks to also, like you said, first utilize any other resources they have.
So just because we would approve this particular one doesn't mean we would spend it. Correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And that, if it's if we approve it and it's a cost reimburse, that doesn't affect RCO, they're good with that?
Yep, that's
Yeah,
pretty normal
that's-
for our grant opportunities is a reimbursement basis.
And if we did that, you would be comfortable with these?
I would be comfortable with these. We had made some other commitments to the Port of Longview for next year to give them 500,000. So that will have to come out of next year's money pretty much. So
How often do we get these funds? And where do
we
they come
get
from?
these funds every month. It's a tax credit rebate from the state.
Oh, the 0.6 or
Yeah.
whatever that is. Yeah.
Mhm. And so we get this money every month. But
And over a year?
I know Woodland needs their
anywhere
money
from
now.
2.8 to 3 million?
Yes, uh-huh.
Each year is fairly.
That's what we're receiving. So I recommend that we approve the Scott Hill Complex Award and the Riverside Park awards, with the Riverside Park being a cost reimbursement contract.
Did
Good with
you
that.
go with it? Did you hear anything from Commissioner Farrell that would suggest otherwise?
No, he was on board
He
with
was
it.
on board.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good with that.
Okay, and then I'll bring the contracts back probably on the August 19th meeting. for
So
approval.
he'd have a chance to say something if he did want to
Yep.
say something. Okay.
Yep. And then that way I can get the Scott Hill Park Award done at the end of August. And that's all I have.
Okay. Well, we're past 10, so I guess we'll just roll into agenda item review. Oh, I'm sorry, Bailey.
They're pointing at each other.
Sean's gonna go first. Bailey, you're just dragging this out. Hmm.
Good morning, Commissioners. We have 3 items on the agenda for tomorrow. The first one is a contract execution with Construction Ahead, Inc., doing business as pavement surface control for the delineator project. I believe you guys have heard about this a few different times, just finalizing that contract out.
This one is paid, it's through a federal program, right?
You know,
I'm pretty
the-
sure she said this was a Fed program that she tapped into.
Unfortunately, Susan's on vacation today, having a good time. Number 2 is our solid waste management La SWIFA grant, the local solid waste financial assistance. This pays for our household hazardous waste, our rural recycling drop boxes. It's for approximately 480,000. We pay 25% of that as our local match. So 360 from the state, 120 from us on that. And then number 3 is the interlocal agreement with the city of Kalama in regards to South Cloverdale and South Cloverdale Conifer Road intersection project. And that's my understanding is redoing those agreements once we had to do some changing on the funding sources. But Susan will be here tomorrow to give you more information on that one.
I know she explained that. I think the state wouldn't allow something out of one fund, so you had to take it out of another
Mhm.
fund,
Yeah.
and that's what spurred
Yeah.
this. It was
Was
kind
all-
of a state-driven change,
Yeah, it's shifting around from one hand to the other.
WashDOT, however you want to say it.
And then we do have some miscellaneous, so after Bailey's done, I'd like to come back up and chat with you again.
Okay?
Bailey Silva, Public Records. I just have one agenda item, which is updating the county policy. We did a major update last year. We forgot a couple things, so there's just a couple small changes that we made to reflect processes that we already have in place. And then I have a presentation. Okay, this is, last year I did an annual BOCC Public Records overview. This is just an updated one. Last year was pretty heavy on public records requests, and this one is pretty heavy on retention. I feel like a lot of my duties have shifted in that realm. So this is an overview of public records requests for 2024. The 785 does not include the sheriff's office. Including the sheriff's office, they received 3,061 last year, so significant more than us.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, they're heavy hitters for sure when it comes to receiving requests.
You uh, you told me not to ask you a ton of questions, but do you, do you know of that, of the sheriffs, how many are the body camera stuff? Any idea?
I don't know the exact amount, but I could ask Julie Harris.
I'd be curious how much it's added to their load.
Yeah, they did have an employee who really did a good job of doing the body cams because it is a complex process to redact the audio and the visual side of it, but I don't know how many exactly that they've
Okay.
received. Which this was a 200% increase from what we had received in 2020, just about 200% from 2023, which I thought was interesting. I don't anticipate that we'll receive 785 requests this year. I think last year we had 2 anomalies that I wouldn't predict occur this year, but I, can't predict anything when it comes to what requests we're gonna receive. And just a recap of kind of things we did last year was Shani was hired in like October of 2023, so we began to transition all the departments to the centralized model in fall of 2023. We did that slowly, and we finished that in spring of last year. We updated the public records policy to reflect those changes. I created a retention training in NeoGov so that employees can know, every document you create is a public record and it can be disclosed, and also that you need to keep it for a minimum time and destroy it when when that time is up. Another big thing was an exiting employee checklist. This is an ever evolving thing that we continue to navigate. It touches on records retention. So it asks the employee when they're leaving, or have you moved your documents to a shared folder so that when you're no longer here, we can have access to them, whether that be for the department to have access to them, or if we get a request for them, just better about our records retention management in that aspect. And then also it goes into, do you have records on your personal device when you leave county employment? And if you do, you need to transfer those also to a shared location so that we have them. So if we get a request, we're not calling the employee 5 months later and they're no longer a county employee, and we have to ask them to give records in response to a request. 2025, we received 277, a little bit longer to final disposition. I think there's a couple reasons for that. We've received an complexity for any and all records requests, which, requires a lot more searching, a lot more documents to produce, a lot more records to review, see if there are any exemptions on them. Shani spent some time building in deflections in our public records portal to help guide the public to what is already available online. So for example, like if someone types in divorce decree, you don't get that through the public records portal. It'll let them know, divorce decrees are filed in Cowlitz County Superior Court. You need to contact them for that. So that kind of removes those requests that we can easily close. So it's kind of why we're seeing an increase. And then Shani's also been working on 4 complex homicide related requests. And then I also think there's an impact to the $2 payment required for requests valued over $2. We give requesters 30 days to make the payment, so it leaves the request open. And then departments have made a lot of their records available online. I think a big one was food inspections. Health department spent quite a while getting those up to date, and I used to produce food inspections quite a bit, but now that they're available, I think it's best for the public and for the county. I mean, I'm not having to respond to a request and they can get their documents quicker, so. Records retention. I've learned that I think that this is communication, collaboration, and hopefully it'll change the culture of document creation, management, all the things. Big goal was countywide training, providing employees the tools to succeed. I've made a lot of the retention schedules, checklists, trainings, all the things available on the internet. We have a department, each department has a designated public records coordinator that we go to fulfill requests and also to deal with any disposition logs or anything like that. And then support on our end, we try to be ongoing and responsive, which I think also we are that way because we have a supportive and responsive legal team and also Washington State Archives. I joke with Bonnie and the Olympia that she's my phone a friend because I don't know all the answers to everything and we're learning all the time on how long to keep things for and no situation is the same.
Bailey, on, as far as the retention goes, you have, department designees. But it's done by default through our IT department, right? I mean, everything that is generated through our system, we already hold back and then when somebody requests it, we withdraw it and give it to them? Or does each department have to go through and make sure that it's being retained?
Right now, most of our systems are just set up to keep everything. Yeah, but we pull those things. IT does not. Yeah. I think a lot of the conversations with the coordinators is, if someone has something on their desktop, which they shouldn't, things should be kept on the server. You'd have to have that employee pull it or have the coordinator work with that employee. Because IT can't get, well, they can, but, this one, or let me go back. These are the 3 trainings. 2 of them are currently available. I worked hard on making this electronic communication one to reflect the policy that the board approved earlier this year. I've worked with Travis on this one. I've touched a little bit on it with State Archives too, just to make sure some of the ideas that Travis and I had are okay to implement from their perspective. But that has not been deployed yet because we are still working on deploying Microsoft Teams, and that's what that's heavy on. We don't have to read this whole thing, but the policy that the board approved was that, Teams chats are to be used solely for transitory communication, and this is like a workflow for employees to use to help them identify if the document is transitory or not, because I think sometimes that can be complicated. And like I said earlier, no 2 things are the same, but hopefully this can give a little bit of guidance for employees. This was the big part that I worked with the states to get the okay on was if communication does evolve from transitory to non-transitory, what should we do? 'Cause I did think we needed to have a process in place. Because, if HR asks me, hey, I want to meet to talk about this policy, it's just scheduling a meeting's pretty transitory communication. But then if someone then responded and was like, I think we should change section 1 to reflect this or whatever, then you kind of get into discussions on policies, which is not a transitory document. So this is the best we can do at the moment, which would be to stop and screenshot the conversation and send it to IT created a retention@calitswa.gov email. So have the employees send the screenshot to the email, and then that way we have it on our end. We can disclose it. We can look in that email in the Barracuda archiver. If someone asks for records, we'll have them because the goal is to have Teams set up to be deleted after 90 days. Another big part of this was we did departmental compliance reviews February through May. It was about 23 different departments. We had 2 different forms. We had the compliance review, which is just a yearly document that will work with the departments to ensure that they're doing certain things. And then the departmental records management plan, which the idea is that the department is responsible for fulfilling that. And then the goal overall is for us to have a consistent approach to retention. We tried to keep our approach as simple and adaptable as we could because I understand that every department creates, manages, and has different procedures and processes in place. Here's a little bit more details. It's my elephant in the room joke because retention nobody wants to talk about. So yeah, 23 departments participated in this, and the Departmental Records Management Plan talks about, what systems does your department keep records in? I think it's a pretty base level knowledge, and it's not something we currently have. So I think this will help us in records, and I also think this information will help IT moving forward. How they manage email management, their disposition procedures. We talked about the exiting employee checklist and kind of the processes that they should have for that. And then talked about how this will be an annual review moving forward. And then the compliance review, which is more for us to fill on their behalf to ensure they're meeting these standards, is that they do have a coordinator and that the coordinator is responsible for working with our records and that they fill out the management plan for for all their records, and that also just strongly suggested that the coordinators in the departments are taking retention training so that they have baseline knowledge of things and that we are getting rid of records. And then the most common compliance issues that we repeatedly heard was email management, duplication of records, electronic records management, specifically Laserfish repository. I was shocked at the amount of departments that use Laserfish. I mean, I know we all use Laserfish, but I guess it was just more than I thought. And I think with that, it's often out of mind, or out of sight, out of mind. We see those boxes of paper records in front of our faces and we need to get rid of them. But when we scan it in and we're retaining it, or it was solely created electronically, we don't see those, and then they go into the repository forever. And then we're keeping them way past retention, and then we have to disclose them when someone wants them because they exist, even though they didn't need to. And then consistently keeping up with retention versus a yearly purge was something else we talked about. Was I think departments are in the habit, which is not a bad, I mean, it's better than not ever getting rid of something, but they often only think about it once a year. But I think always having records management on your mind is important. Another big thing for me was making it fun. My job isn't always fun, but I have fun making these, and hopefully people have fun reading them. We celebrated records.
Bailey, you're supposed to say the commissioner's office is a hoot.
It's a lot of fun, yes. We celebrated Records Management Month in April, and I did an interactive Jeopardy game, which I learned quickly that apparently I should include scores because the amount of calls that I got and people are like, we're trying to beat our coworkers and we don't have a score. So if I do that again, I'll include the score. But doing other things just to get people, I did a Dan number scavenger hunt, which kind of, the way I viewed that was like making people look at retention schedules and understand how to use them, because they are also not the most simplest thing to understand. Looking forward, I'll touch on these independently. I have a disclaimer on this one. My little disclaimer is that the success of these are highly reliant upon IT. I say this probably twice a day. I am feeling more like an IT employee every day. But so a lot of these things are IT related, and I think it requires us to collaborate. The first three, I think, are things in the near future that we're working on, which is evaluating a new public record system aimed at improving usability for both the public and internal staff. Right now, we're continuing collaboration with IT and the vendor to ensure that the product meets expectations. Another thing is the social media archiver retention. We use Archive Social right now, and it's kind of been treated the same way the county has treated our email management. Was we got a program that archives records, and then no one ever set it up to deal with the actual retention side of things. So working with the departments to understand what they're using social media for and identify the retention periods, and then go in and apply the rules so we're not having a million records kept in there. And then the other big one right now is the countywide Microsoft Teams chat rollout. which we're working with IT and a vendor. I have an email from Travis that I need to respond to in regards to this, and then we're setting up a meeting to enable this across all departments, which is why that electronic communications training in NeoGov has not gone out yet. And then the other three big ones I'll touch more on is AI, the future of records information management. I think this is a topic that might be too big for me to even understand or think about some of the time. But I'll, like I said, touch more on that on the next slide. And then email cleanup initiative. This is a conversation we've been having since I've been in this role for over 3 years now. We need to improve the email management that we have in place. My goal has always been the state archives meat cleaver method, which is kind of going in there, identifying the longest retention period, and then getting rid of everything prior to that date. And then the other big thing is the retention compliance to electronic record systems, which my goal here is to kind of add to those compliance reviews that we had and work with departments to identify their systems that they have and the records that they keep in there, and really work with IT to help get rid of those things. So for artificial intelligence, I would like to utilize tools to help manage records more effectively. The volume of electronic records continues to grow at an overwhelming pace. I took a training, I don't know, probably 2 weeks ago. It talked about how on average, and this was just in regards to actually Teams chats, employees create 12 chats a day. And if you have 500 employees, it's like 1 million or 3 million chats by the end of the year in like a 12-month time period. So things just continue to grow. I want to continue to be aware of the evolving AI world. I feel like a year ago, AI was not a big topic of discussion in my world, at least, but it continues to pop up, and I think it will continue to impact a lot of things. I'm working with Travis and Calvin next month on an AI policy. Obviously, my goal is always to keep records management in mind. But while we're here, I wanted to also put an important note that records applies to AI created content. So if you are having conversations with ChatGPT or you're throwing stuff in there and you're keeping it, those are subject to being disclosed public records. So just my little note. More info on the Teams chat rollout. It's going to be integrated into workflows to improve communication and collaboration. I think my goal is for retention to be clearly understood in both the initial rollout and then also long-term on the platform. Some departments currently utilize Teams or Teams groups, but not Teams chat. And this is also my base knowledge of the system at this time. I haven't been in there to really understand it. I've just heard about it from people. So working more with IT on that. And then I think a big obstacle that will pop up here is the limitations we have with the licensing that the county currently has. And then the next steps is just working with IT and that vendor to review our deployment of Teams and also potentially the licensing for retention, which Purview is Microsoft's retention module. The email cleanup, this is what keeps me up at night. Structured email data cleanup will align with approved retention schedules and support data governance is the goal. It's currently being used as to keep everything forever, regardless of retention, and the exponential growth continues to occur. Some of the obstacles that we've identified in our meetings that we've had about this is it's a little bit complex, but there's the Exchange, which is what, you and I open, when we open Outlook on our computer, we're opening Microsoft Exchange. And then when we are using Barracuda, we're in the archiver. So the records exist in 2 places, but for public records disclosure purposes, I'm only going into the archiver because everything that is in your Exchange also exists in your archiver. So we can't get rid of things out of the archiver and not also get rid of them out of the Exchange. They need to be dealt with in both places, which I think just adds a little bit of complexity. Also, the conversation of automation versus end user responsibility. I think compliance is important to be given from legal, IT, records, leaving the end user responsible for making those determinations, I think is a little bit difficult. And then technology tools, AI, and then also an expiring contract. Our Barracuda contract is up, I believe, in December of 2027. So Travis and I continue to have conversations on this topic, and I feel like always will. This was just, I was proud of this, so I wanted to mention this, was in 2022, I did a presentation to the board with Kim Hort on, it's a little bit hard to see, try to fit it all on one slide, but the top left graph shows the emails that we've accumulated in Barracuda up into 2022, which was about at 25 million. At that time, we had taken the average growth per year and calculated the potential of what it would be by 2030, 2030. And I estimated we would have in 2024, we'd have 31 million. In 2025, we'd have 35 million, and we have just shy of 32 million emails in there, which just should not be the case, but unfortunately that's where we're at. So hopefully we can continue to make improvements on getting a tool to help us with that, or whatever that may be. Just a little bit more on the electronic records systems. My goal is for all departments to be consistently meeting records retention requirements through the annual review, proactive education, and then collaborative support on our end. I think paper records are generally well maintained across departments. We have some documents in the annex that I want to start tackling that have dust on the boxes, sort of things. But the electronic management remains a significant challenge, and many systems lack retention practices. I think obstacles, again, are technology tools, staff resources, and then also knowledge on all of our ends. But again, like I've repeatedly said, we continue to learn things and grow and figure it out. So the next steps on my end would be to identify systems and the owners of the systems, and also what DAN numbers for the records exist in those systems. And then in a perfect world, which I've learned I can't live in a perfect world, would be to implement something like this. But I think it's more sustainable to actually work on like an implementation plan to how we can go about doing this so it is long-term sustainable. And then this is cheesy, but I'm going to say it anyways. Records management touches every department and every employee. Sustainable and effective records practices rely on a shared responsibility. One of the things that Shani and I repeatedly told departments is that our goal is to make progress and be better, not to be perfect. I think retention is not something that has been a focus for a long time. So each improvement that we make brings us closer to a more efficient and compliant organization. And I think that is directly impacts the employees of the county and also the public too. So that is my presentation.
You did good. I happen to haven't been here that long. I've been here long enough to see some of the activities and the stuff come through and the wait times and stuff before we centralized it and you took it over with Shani, and it's been massive improvement. It is it's one of and I agree with you, it's kind of the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it, but I'll tell you, statewide, there's people out there that file reports, and the only reason they're filing them is to look for an error because they make a good living off the fines. It's become a business model for some, and so it's it is an exposure area, so it's something we have to pay attention to, and I think you guys have done well with it. It's a tough one to keep your head around for sure. And
So real quick, maybe before you leave, am I understanding you to say that we can do better as far as the retention goes? Because my head was spinning as you were talking about the retention part of it. Are we creating work that we don't necessarily need to do because we're retaining records longer than we're supposed to? And that 32 million emails that we have stored, that's got to be causing issues as far as our software and holding capacity and all that kind of stuff goes.
yeah,
Yeah. My favorite example of that is I got a request one time for Dennis Weber's email communication, and every time you accept a calendar invite, it goes like it creates an accepted email, and that's thrown into the Barracuda reviewer. And I think I probably looked at like 200 emails, and that person who requested those records also, that takes time. I don't know. I click on every document I disclose to make sure that there's nothing in there, but it is time consuming for us to keep those records, for us to look at those records. It takes more time for us to fulfill a request for likely the individual did not want to see Dennis's accepted calendar invites, but they're in there. So I have to disclose them. And I did ask Travis actually about the Barracuda side of like us retaining data in Barracuda. And I don't believe Barracuda is currently a system where we pay for like the volume of data in there. So that's not an issue with that specifically, but I think that issue exists on the servers, on Laserfish, that sort of thing, but not in regards to emails.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners Rader and Mr. Dahl. I am Anna Lunde, right-of-way agent for Cowlitz County Public Works. Today, we have 2 items for miscellaneous agenda for Public Works. We have a right-of-way easement for power underground. A gentleman named Donovan Ziegler had purchased a property over on Clark Creek, 749 Clark Creek Road. And his access to his parcel was through an ingress and egress easement over a parcel that we own. We bought it in 1981 to make sure that the road was preserved and protected. The easement was limited to only ingress egress. It did not allow for any type of utility. The option that the gentleman had was either dropping utilities straight from Coal Creek, which posed a lot of construction issue. The other option was asking for an easement through the existing ingress egress. So we have a right-of-way easement for power underground created from the PUD, and we would just like to have that signed off by Commissioner Dahl.
So we're really helping the homeowner here
We are.
get stuff in there.
Any questions on that? Pass that. All right, thank you. Moving along, we have a quitclaim deed. Cowlitz County, I don't know what year, but we originally purchased it in 125 Industrial Way. A piece of land was titled fee simple to Cowlitz County because in the early days, we titled all of our properties into Cowlitz County and not simply into the name title of the entity that was using it, in this case, Three Rivers Regional Wastewater Authority. And so we have the parcel of land that is currently titled as fee simple Cowlitz County, Washington. We would like to quitclaim that over to Three Rivers Regional Wastewater Authority. Sean?
Yeah, so Three Rivers left the county quite a few years ago during one of our reviews of some of our simple properties we had. This pump station was still under Cowlitz County's name. All the fees and everything were still being paid by Three Rivers, so all that transferred appropriately. Is just cleaning up the record on this one. Any questions on that?
No?
Might give you some paper to sign if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine. Sure.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
I see Jessica. You want?
Good morning, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I just have one follow-up request from Public Works this morning. They're requesting to start their new Longview shop supervisor at step 4, which would be about a 8% increase from what they currently make with overtime and out-of-class pay.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. And that's all I
That,
have.
that quick?
That's all.
Kathy, I had one more question. I'm sorry, I had one more question pop in my head for you and just see how we handle it. Is that, a function the other night, a meeting the other night, Commissioner Rader and Commissioner Farrell were there, and we're listening to Senator Wilson talk, he talked about things at the state. And one of the things he brought up at the state, and I'm trying to remember the number, maybe you remember the number, the tort claims that the state
Oh,
pays that never get shown as a line item, and it was just an outrageous amount of money. And to me, and I know we have tort claims. Do we line item them, or are they put into departments that the claims about, or how do we handle
So Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. At the county, we record a contingent liability on the books through comptrollers, through the financials. So they look at what items we have open, and we footnote those in the financials, and they'll book, if they need to, a contingent liability on some of those claims. But as you know, our exposure, because of being with the risk pool, is only 100,000
Right.
on each one of those. And then thereafter, the risk pool picks up that. So the risk pool is actually booking a much larger contingent liability than we would ever book.
than we do?
Right.
Although you could argue it's reflected in our premiums.
It's reflected in our
Yeah.
assessment, yes.
I think his point with the state, gosh, I probably got this wrong, but I thought he said it like close to $1 billion or something that they
Wow.
pay out in tort claims. And really, when you think through the process, state gets sued, they pay the claim. Well, who's paying the claim? Actually, it's the taxpayer paying the claim. And the amount is getting so big, he wanted it to be a line item so people could actually see what kind of stuff
I want to say it
comes
was
through.
double the state budget, the pending tort claims that the state has against.
Yeah, yeah. And then we heard last Tuesday, the state's paying a fine of whatever a month because they haven't closed Western, and that's all the stuff that ends up going to the taxpayer. So it made me curious and ours are nowhere near that. I'm not saying we're even close, anywhere even close to that.
Yeah,
But-
so we have the one account that we budget. It's called claims liability. It's its own fund. And previous to this past year, we had been putting in 100,000 each year into that account. And then starting in 25, we put 300,000 budgeted for our portion of the deductibles.
But, okay,
Yeah, and
Perfect.
so we just barely squeaked by on that 300,000. But
yeah,
that's the extent of our expense right now.
yeah. Okay, thanks. It was just came to mind. So we've had some others join us. So what do we got? We have an executive session? Is it Jason calling it or you? Okay. Okay. Eh, Yeah, and what's the potential litigation? And we're looking at 15 minutes to get us warmed up. Okay.
Tells me that you're anticipating.
I know, okay, we'll adjourn to executive session, potential litigation, 15 minutes. Okay, we're back from executive session. We did have a conversation on litigation and we gave building and planning authority to proceed with a possible abatement process. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? All good? Okay, we will adjourn. Thank you.